Hi Ian, I'm very happy that you are here for the new conversation about what is it the independent today in digital culture in the globalization of art system. And thank you for your time, and I'm very happy that I have the possibility for have the confrontation about your work, starting with your show in Basel. Thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure, Lorenzo. Really good to see you.
Great. I want to start about the project that you make in Basel, in Florence, in a no-profit space. Starting about the title. The title of your project at Basel in Florence is Ping Murmur. What is it? What does it mean? What do you want to evoke with this title?
So this particular title comes from a text by Samuel Beckett, and the text is called Ping, or in French it's Bing, with a B. And it is just one phrase that has been lifted from this text, this kind of piece of performative writing. And it's a text that describes, in a very sensory way, the body in a white space, in a white, almost intensely white cube environment. And I was thinking about Bassa, I was thinking about its size and proportions, the fact that it is a white cube space. So it's not a cube, it's two rectangular spaces. And the experience of being in a relatively small space and thinking about the importance of one's body as a viewer, as someone entering a space like this and encountering an artwork, because it's a very intimate experience, the Barca space. It's rather wonderful to have this kind of space just off the street. And so it's kind of recalling this moment of attention that one receives from this Samuel Beckett piece. So.
And your work, it's based in idea of assembly not only of material, but also about stories, reference, the fragment from philosophy, from history. And how do you choose the material, and how do you choose the stories for the special project in Basel?
Okay, I mean, some of these questions are improvised. Some of the solutions are improvised, the answers to your question. And in a way, what one's seeing here with this artwork is, on the one side of the space is, as I say, these paintings of the Beckett text. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, it's this proposition. It's a kind of architectural model that one's seeing here. One part of the model is a rendering of a Peter de Bretteville house that he designed in the 1970s. He's an architect who designed this house sort of coming out of hippie modernism, which is a kind of both this idea of, what happens to modernity when it hits a kind of LA 1960s environment. And one of the gestures of this house is this idea of the soft curtains or blinds that really change the reception of how one thinks about what otherwise would be a functional space. That there's something more informal, more inviting, very literally softer. And what one has here is both a makeshift wooden model made out of reclaimed materials, and another model, which is an inflatable, which is this kind of polythene sack, which is in some ways something bodily. Again, it's like an internal organ of some kind, maybe a stomach, maybe a lung, something that breathes, something that moves. It moves as you walk around it, as you kneel down in front of it. There's a sense of the entrails or something within this sac, which is the cabling and the technology needing to project the image. But the cabling here almost becomes vein-like or bodily in itself, you know. So there's this kind of inside-outside that one's looking at. So you have one quite rational piece of modernist architecture and another piece of architecture that is very bodily. It's on form. It's sort of entropic. It's, you know, and it's a conversation between these two pieces within this space. Yeah, I can go on, but that's.
And maybe you created a very important confrontation about fragile and concrete, no?
Yeah.
You're working a lot about these conflict, but not conflict for you.
Yeah. So you'll remember that when we when this piece arrived, it arrived in a FedEx box and it had totally collapsed and was smashed and broken.
Yes.
And you know, the fragility of it was literal in that sense. We spent like 2 or 3 days just remaking it and mending it, and, you know. But I think that that's a very important part of these works, is that they're on the floor. And the fact that they're on the floor means that they are vulnerable. And that creates a state of attention which is different to something that has a barrier around it, or something that is on a plinth, or something that becomes invigilated in some way. That one's relationship to this thing is more intimate and it's more concentrated. And your body in relation to this body becomes quite intense. And, you know, you were talking about the project space and the importance of independence. I think one of the really beautiful things about an independent, intimate space like Bassa is that this kind of thing, this kind of encounter can happen. Because very often in institutions these days, you know, everything is controlled in a way that makes it very difficult to have this kind of arrangement, you know.
It's beautiful. And it's possible tell more about the video and the relationship with the visibility and invisibility in relationship with the sack of plastic.
Sure. Okay, so when you enter your space, the door is, in this image, the door is behind the video. So as you enter, you can't actually see there is a video. You just see there is this yellow sack. And it's only as you walk into the space and you walk around it that you then become aware of the video, the film that's projected on the side of the bag that is not visible. And this, in turn, allows for, again, a different kind of encounter or experience. It asks you to, like this guy here, asks you to go low. It asks you to come to its level and asks you to peer in to the image. And the image itself is of the interior of the model, the wooden model, which is the other side, the other part of this work. So it's an act of entering into an image and creates, again, a different kind of intimacy, a journey inside, because you can't actually, from the model's point of view, it's difficult to see into it in this way. And it creates a different relationship to scale. And with a different relationship to scale, you have a different relationship to imagination. Susan Stewart wrote a book on longing, which talks about in a sense, the childlike imagination that occurs through entering visually a different scale to one's body. And that's what's happening here.
It's incredible. But can we consider the work in Base a critic or a celebration of modernity?
I think one can have both at the same.
Both? Okay.
One doesn't deny the other. I think it's really important to have a critical relationship to these things. It's through critique, it's through engagement, grappling with these ideas, what works, what doesn't work, which means that one's taking these ideas and these propositions seriously. So in relation to the kind of modernism that Peter de Bretteville is talking about, I think engaging with that critically is important. At the same time, I wouldn't be bothered if I wasn't totally interested in it as well. That there's a kind of, there's an investment in these things, because I think these things are kind of wonderful. So it's both a celebration and it's a critique in a way. I mean, there's plenty that I feel that even Peter de Bretteville would probably now, in retrospect, do differently in relation to this building. So it's a building that is both trying to be communal and at the same time retain a certain private space, a certain autonomy. And it's questionable whether that's successful or not, and whether actually the social values that it's promoting are actually contradictory in relation to the amount of money that it takes to build something like this. So there's all kinds of economic, political criticisms that you could bring to bear on a work of modernism like this. But at the same time, there's something really invested and beautiful and engaged about the works. So I'm super interested in them as well.
Great. And maybe about your work, you try at create the new attention at the heritage of the culture, of the history, of the human history, because today they have many possibilities about the digital archive. They have the many information, but at the same times, maybe me, you, the all people is very blind, because don't look in very good perspective the information from the past. Maybe about your work, they speaking about this problem about the heritage, about the use the new look, or what is it for you?
I'm like you're talking to me as an old person, and I think back to when
come on.
I think back to when we first met, and I was still probably just a student or something. So it's funny how time moves so quickly, but I think things have fundamentally changed in terms of how people visit exhibition spaces now, how people gain information, and you talk about the digital, and the access one has on through the internet is amazing. But of course, with that comes a loss, and it could be a loss of phenomenological, physical, material, visceral, tactile encounters with artworks. And I'm aware of how brilliant it is that we can now speak on Zoom. We can engage through these images that are coming this way. As a technology, this is relatively recent. But it does mean, with the increase of speed, with the increase of the digital world, the metaverse, whatever one wants to call it, there's a loss of physicality. There's a loss of bodily presence, and I think this work is very much about those things. It's about the tonal tactility, the mood, the timbre, these kind of things that can only really occur with the direct encounter with the object. So I'm still, in that sense, resolutely a materialist. That isn't to negate all the wonderful things that the digital make possible and the virtual make possible. I'm not interested in being anti-technology in a kind of dubious Heideggerian way. But I do feel one has to be alert to always both what one gains and what one loses. And
this is very important. And what is it for you today, the role of the artist? And what does it mean today to be independent in the art system? It's a very two different, or not different, but it's very two important question.
Both of them, sort of the way you've set them up, they demand answers and definitions, and I'm not certain there is one answer or one definition that will be satisfactory. But if I'm speaking about the role of the artist, I can speak personally that it is about a form of attention. It's a form of being alert and attentive to the world around, whether that be the world of objects, of ideas, of politics, of poetry, that these things are important, and it's for us to encounter them and to develop them. So that would be a very general answer. And independence in relation to, I think you're asking me this question in relation to Barca in particular, and I feel that this space is so important for what it does for the idea of locality, and maybe to do with what you were talking about earlier with the digital and the virtual and these things, because there's something about having the presence of this space within this place in Florence, this street in Florence, which is really important, which is to do with community, to do with locality, to do with that heritage you were talking about, the artists over the generations that have been in that space and have engaged in conversations, dialogue, that these things are super precious, and they are what continues to make artwork and material artwork so necessary. So that's what I would say about the independence aspect of Barca. And I feel really privileged to have been invited to make this work.
Wow, great. Thank you. And I have the last question, Ian. What you suggest at the young artists they want funded now the no-profit space in this strange era of post-internet era?
I think it's the same thing that I've just been talking about, which is the importance of community. This community of artists, community of makers, of thinkers, of critics, of curators, these spaces allow for that community to develop and those conversations to develop, because otherwise isolation happens. And it's super important to have these spaces for meeting and for encountering work. I mean, how else would we do it? So
great. Thank you, Ian, about your words, about your work, and thank you for have a great show in Florence, in Base. And good luck for the next project.
You too. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.